Hey look, it's another Bombliss video review on this here web zone. But on the bright side, they didn't make a whole lot of them. So... This is Super Bombliss DX, released in 1999 exclusively in Japan for Game Boy Color from Bulletproof Software, being played here on the Tetris Forever compilation. And this is a slightly updated and colorized version of the Game Boy Color version of Super Bombliss, which did see release around these parts under the name of Tetris Blast. Now we know Nintendo released an updated version of Tetris dubbed Tetris DX for Game Boy Color, and I guess we needed a Bombliss equivalent. But Tetris DX is practically a different game from its original Game Boy release, in terms of gameplay, features, control, and just little nuances. Super Bombliss DX, on the other hand, is just Super Bombliss in color, and with an added puzzle mode that was previously featured in versions of Bombliss that was paired up with some variation of Tetris in past titles. In other words, there's very little incentive to jump from the older Game Boy release to the later color version outside of added color because they're both pretty much the same game. And just to prove that they're both the same game, we're just going to recycle the old Tetris Blast script, change a few things appropriately, and just go from there. So Super Bombliss DX, or Bombliss in general, is a different beast from your usual Tetris offering, because the goal here isn't to form complete lines to clear them from the well, but rather to clear everything out of the well. Forming lines on its own does nothing. They'll count, but they'll stay put. Rather, your main aim is to form lines with bombs in them, at which point any bombs within a line will explode and clear a certain distance. The more lines you form, the bigger the explosive yield for each bomb, and if the blast reaches another bomb, that'll set off a chain reaction and cause more explosions. If you assemble 4 bombs together in a square pattern, that will create a super bomb and cue the AVGN clip, whose blast will cover the well's width. Ideally, one of these placed in the middle with a low stack is usually enough to clear the whole lot, and that's usually what you want to aim for. Learning how bombs work is a key element to Super Bombliss DX because bombs only cover a certain distance on their own, so forming a line with a single bomb only results in a small blast clearing away part of that line and leaving the rest hanging, save for any loose segments that will fall below. Forming more lines will increase the distance covered, and it doesn't matter where those lines are formed, they don't have to be bunched together. If they're full lines in a well, they'll count and they'll increase the blast radius of your bombs. It's a fairly basic concept that admittedly isn't entirely straightforward, especially to the newcomer, but once you get the hang of how things work, things do get a bit easier to process and manage, but not necessarily easier to master. Super Bombliss DX offers 4 modes of play. There's Contest, the main single-player mode offering you 100 boards for you to clear in the least amount of moves possible, with any remaining moves added to your overall score. Every 5th board cleared rewards you with a brief intermission and you're given a password for every board you clear. Should you prefer something less strict and more freestyle, there's the Training mode, which is really just a marathon mode that doesn't keep track of any stats and keeps going until you either top out or you just quit. Or you could try out the Puzzle mode, which is the DX exclusive version from the older Tetris 2 plus Bombliss release, where you're tasked with completing set puzzles with a set number of pieces, also powered by passwords. And finally, there's the Fighting mode, a special mode where you're trying to kill a little critter on screen either by squishing it or blowing it up. And you do this until a critter eventually dies, at which point you move on to the next level and you clear another critter. And look, I personally didn't care for this, but it's something different from the usual competitive format for whatever that's worth. Control is typical Tetris fare for the time. Move your pieces with the D-pad, pushing down for a faster descent, and 2 rotate buttons. All of these work just fine. Super Bombliss DX looks like a typical Tetris offering on the old Game Boy. Nice well with blocks on the left, some stats on the right, big old preview of your next piece on top. Fairly clean and clear layout that you'll be staring at for hours on end, or however long you end up playing this. The intermissions that play every so often are also kind of funny in a good way. And this originally being a black Game Boy cartridge, this was also backwards compatible with OG Game Boy, and apparently even had Super Game Boy compatibility. Whatever that actually entailed, I wouldn't know, I don't have the cart. But it's also a fairly pleasant sounding game with a couple catchy upbeat tracks that play for the different modes, but you could pause the game and still press select to cycle through the tracks if you want to listen to something else or nothing at all. Sound effects are simplistic but adequate, and the explosions sound fine for portable Bombliss fare, so it's fine, I guess. Overall, Super Bombliss DX on Game Boy Color is the same game you probably played on Game Boy when it was called Tetris Blast Around These Parts, but now it's in color and it has a puzzle mode. In any event, it's a fine version of the Tetris variant that's different from the usual format and quite a bit of fun when you know how it all works. All in all, this one's okay.